The evening started like any other. I was coming back from work, tired but looking forward to a quiet dinner with my wife, Emily, and our 4-year-old son, Liam. The house was unusually silent as I walked through the front door. Normally, Liam would be running around, his laughter filling every corner of the house. "Emily? Liam?" I called out, but there was no response. I checked the kitchen and the living room, but they were empty. As I made my way upstairs, I noticed the light in our bedroom was on. I pushed open the door and found Emily sitting on the bed, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. "Emily, what's wrong?" I rushed to her side, my heart pounding with concern. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "John, we need to talk." My stomach tightened at the tone of her voice. "What is it? What's happened?" Emily took a deep breath, struggling to find the words. I've been unfaithful to you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "What do you mean?" Tears streamed down her face as she continued. "For the past 5 years, I have been seeing other men." I stumbled back, unable to process what she was saying. 5 years? Emily, how could you? I was lonely, John. "You were always working, and I felt neglected," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Anger surged through me, mixed with a crushing sense of betrayal. "And Liam? Is he even mine?" Her silence was deafening. She didn't need to say anything. The answer was written all over her face. I stormed out of the room, my mind racing. My wife had been cheating on me for half a decade, and my son might not even be my own. The pain was unbearable, but I knew I needed to confront the truth. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I went downstairs and poured myself a stiff drink, trying to steady my trembling hands. Thoughts raced through my mind, memories of moments with Emily, now tainted by the knowledge of her infidelity. How could I have been so blind? Minutes turned into hours as I sat alone in the dimly lit kitchen, grappling with the enormity of Emily's confession. Anguish gnawed at my insides, a visceral ache that threatened to consume me whole. I replayed our years together in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed, clues that could have hinted at the truth beneath the surface. When the numbness finally began to fade, replaced by a dull ache of betrayal, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I needed to confront Emily, to demand the answers that would either shatter what remained of our marriage or pave the way for a painful reconciliation. I returned to our bedroom, finding Emily still sitting on the bed, her tear-streaked face turned towards the window. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of anguish and resignation. "Emily," I began, my voice hoarse with emotion. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering away from mine. "Since before Liam was born." My heart sank. The implications of her words hit me like a freight train. "And Liam?" "I don't know, John," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I never meant for things to go this far. I love Liam with all my heart, regardless of everything." I paced the room, my mind reeling. The weight of Emily's betrayal bore down on me, threatening to suffocate any semblance of rational thought. Questions tumbled through my mind, each more painful than the last. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I demanded, my voice rising with anger and hurt. "I was afraid," she confessed, tears streaming down her face anew. "I didn't want to lose you, John, but I couldn't keep living a lie." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words, years of deception, longing, and shattered trust. I struggled to find the right words, grappling with the overwhelming urge to lash out and the desperate need to understand. Finally, I spoke, my voice barely a whisper. "I need time. I need to process all of this." Emily nodded silently, her eyes pleading for forgiveness that felt impossible to grant. As I turned away, the weight of our broken marriage settled over me like a suffocating blanket. The road ahead stretched out uncertainly, a path fraught with pain and heartache. But amidst the devastation, a flicker of determination ignited within me. I would find the truth about Liam, regardless of the outcome. And as for Emily and me, our future remained a fragile, uncertain question mark, hanging in the silent air of our once happy home. I found myself standing in the hallway, the walls seeming to close in on me. The life I had known, the family I cherished, had just been shattered by Emily's confession. I needed air. I stumbled down the stairs and out the front door, gasping as if I had been underwater for too long. My thoughts swirled chaotically. 5 years? How had I been so blind? How had I not noticed the signs? I walked aimlessly down the street, the cool night air doing little to calm the storm inside me. Memories of our life together flashed through my mind, now tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. Our wedding day, the birth of Liam, the countless moments we had shared, all of it felt like a cruel joke. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something to release the anguish that was tearing me apart. Eventually, I found myself at the park where I often took Liam to play. The playground was empty, the swing swaying gently in the breeze. I sat on one of the benches, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of the chaos. How had Emily managed to deceive me for so long? What kind of man was I that I hadn't seen it? Doubts about myself and my own worthiness crept in, compounding the pain of her infidelity. I thought about Liam, my beautiful boy who might not be mine. The thought tore at my heart. I loved him more than anything in the world, but now I faced the possibility that he was another man's child. How could I look at him the same way? As the night wore on, I knew I couldn't stay in the park forever. I had to face Emily again, had to demand answers. But the thought of going back to that house, to the woman who had betrayed me so deeply, filled me with dread. With heavy steps, I made my way home. The house was still, Emily's sobs now silent. I found her in the living room, staring blankly at the floor. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with guilt and sorrow. "John, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Sorry?" I echoed, the word feeling hollow. "How could you do this to us, Emily? To me, to Liam?" "I never meant for it to happen," she said, tears streaming down her face again. It just did." I shook my head, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let this go on for so long?" She hesitated, then said, "I was afraid, John. Afraid of losing you, of losing everything we had. And I was afraid of what you'd think of me." I laughed bitterly. "What do I think of you? Emily, you've destroyed our family. How am I supposed to trust you after this?" There was a long silence. Finally, I said, "We need to do a paternity test. I need to know if Liam is my son." Emily nodded, her face pale. "I understand." As I turned to leave the room, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. My entire world had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to piece it back together. But one thing was clear. I needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The next morning dawned with a heavy weight on my shoulders. Sleep had eluded me, my mind consumed with the turmoil of the previous night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's tear-stained face and heard her confession echoing in my mind. I descended the stairs wearily, the events of the previous evening replaying in my thoughts like a broken record. The house felt emptier now, devoid of the warmth and comfort that had once filled its walls. Liam's absence was a palpable ache in my heart, a reminder of the uncertainty that now clouded our family's future. Emily was already in the kitchen when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of apprehension and remorse. Neither of us spoke as I poured myself a cup of coffee, the silence heavy with unspoken words and unanswered questions. Finally, I broke the silence. "When can we schedule the paternity test?" Emily flinched slightly at my words, her gaze dropping to the floor. I'll call the doctor today," she murmured. I nodded curtly, my jaw clenched with tension. Part of me wanted to lash out, to demand more answers, but another part felt numb, overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation. Liam's paternity would determine so much. My future with him, my relationship with Emily, and the very foundation of trust that had been irreparably shattered. After a tense breakfast that neither of us had much appetite for, Emily retreated to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I paced the kitchen, my mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, hurt, betrayal. They mingled together in a tangled mess that threatened to consume me. Hours passed in agonizing uncertainty before Emily returned with a tentative expression. "I've made an appointment for tomorrow afternoon," she said softly. I nodded again, my throat tight. "Good," was all I managed to say. The rest of the day passed in a haze of waiting. Every moment stretched interminably, each tick of the clock a painful reminder of the seconds slipping away. Emily kept her distance, giving me space to process, though the weight of her presence lingered like a specter in the room. Night fell slowly, the darkness outside mirroring the heaviness in my heart. Sleep once again eluded me, my thoughts consumed by the impending paternity test and the daunting implications it held. Would Liam be my son, or would I face the devastating reality that he belonged to another man? As dawn approached, I found myself standing by Liam's bedroom door, watching him sleep peacefully. His innocence was a stark contrast to the turmoil that had engulfed our lives, a reminder of the love I still held for him despite the uncertainty of his parentage. The morning sun cast a golden glow through the window, illuminating the small room with a sense of fleeting warmth. I closed my eyes briefly, willing myself to find strength amidst the chaos. Whatever the test revealed, I knew one thing for certain: our lives would never be the same again. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, images of Emily and our life together haunted me. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying our happiest moments, now tinged with a bitter aftertaste. How had it all come to this? I first met Emily at a mutual friend's party. She was vibrant, her laughter contagious, and her smile lit up the room. I was instantly drawn to her. We talked for hours that night, discovering shared interests and dreams. By the end of the evening, I knew I wanted to see her again. Our relationship blossomed quickly. We spent weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and going on spontaneous road trips. Emily had a way of making the mundane feel extraordinary. She was my partner in crime, my confidante, and my best friend. I remember the day I proposed to her. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Central Park. We were sitting by the lake, the trees ablaze with red and gold. I was nervous, fumbling with the ring in my pocket, but when I finally asked her to marry me, the look of pure joy on her face made every anxious moment worth it. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair with close friends and family. We exchanged vows under a canopy of twinkling lights, promising to love and cherish each other forever. It felt like the start of a fairy tale. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a cozy little house and made it our own, filling it with love and laughter. Emily and I were a team, facing life's challenges together. When we found out she was pregnant, it felt like the final piece of our perfect puzzle falling into place. I can still remember the day Liam was born. Emily was exhausted but radiant, cradling our newborn son in her arms. I had never felt such profound happiness and pride. Watching Liam grow, his first steps, his first words, those moments were the highlights of my life. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. I got a promotion at work, which meant longer hours and more stress. Emily, meanwhile, became more involved in her own projects. We drifted apart without even realizing it, our lives becoming parallel rather than intertwined. I recalled the subtle signs I had missed, the times Emily seemed distant, the unexplained absences, the hushed phone calls. At the time, I brushed them off, too caught up in my own world to see the cracks forming in our relationship. Now, lying in the darkness, the weight of those missed signs pressed down on me. How had I been so blind? How had I let my marriage slip through my fingers? As dawn broke, I made a decision. I couldn't change the past, but I could seek the truth. I needed to know who Liam's father was. More importantly, I needed to understand why Emily had strayed and whether there was any hope for us moving forward. The next morning, I found Emily in the kitchen, her eyes puffy from crying. We sat down at the table, a heavy silence hanging between us. "We need to talk about the paternity test," I said, my voice steady but firm. Emily nodded, her expression resigned. "I know. I'll make the arrangements." I looked at her, searching for a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with. "Why, Emily? Why did you do it?" She sighed deeply, looking away. "I don't know, John. I was lonely and I felt like you didn't see me anymore, but I know that's no excuse. I betrayed you and I betrayed our family." Her words cut deep, but they were a step toward the honesty we desperately needed. As we sat there, I realized that understanding the why might be just as important as knowing the truth about Liam. It wouldn't erase the pain, but it might help me find a way to move forward, one way or another. In the days following Emily's confession, I found myself frequently retreating into the sanctuary of my memories. I wanted to remember a time when things were simpler and happier. As I walked through the house, every room seemed to echo with the laughter and joy we once shared. The early years of our marriage felt like a dream now, almost too perfect to be real. Emily and I moved into our house shortly after our wedding. It was a modest place, but it was ours, and we filled it with love. We spent our weekends painting the walls, picking out furniture, and planting a small garden in the backyard. It was a labor of love, and every corner of that house bore our mark. I recalled how we would collapse into bed, exhausted but happy, knowing we were building our future together. Our friends used to joke that we were the perfect couple. We had an effortless way of communicating, often finishing each other's sentences. We shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our dreams. It felt like we were invincible, as if nothing could ever come between us. Emily was the heart of our home. She had a knack for turning the simplest occasions into celebrations. Birthdays, anniversaries, and even random Tuesdays became special with her touch. I remember one particular evening when she surprised me with a candlelit dinner in our backyard. She had strung fairy lights around the trees, and as we ate under the stars, I couldn't imagine being happier. We also traveled a lot in those early years, weekend getaways, spontaneous road trips, and a memorable vacation to Europe. We wandered through ancient streets, marveled at art and architecture, and made promises for our future. Every trip brought us closer, solidifying the bond we thought was unbreakable. The pinnacle of our joy came with the news of Emily's pregnancy. We had talked about having children, but nothing could have prepared us for the sheer elation we felt when we discovered we were expecting. Emily glowed with happiness, and I was filled with a sense of awe and responsibility. The pregnancy was a beautiful journey. We spent countless evenings planning for the baby, decorating the nursery, and dreaming about the life we would give our child. I was there for every ultrasound and every doctor's appointment, holding Emily's hand and marveling at the miracle of life growing inside her. The day Liam was born was the happiest day of my life. Emily was a trooper, and when she finally held our son in her arms, I felt a surge of love and pride that was indescribable. We were a family, and it felt like everything had fallen perfectly into place. For a while, life was blissful. We adjusted to parenthood, navigating sleepless nights and diaper changes with a sense of humor and teamwork. Watching Liam grow, his first smile, and his first steps brought us immense joy. We were a unit, bound together by love and the shared experience of raising our child. As I sat in the quiet of our home, these memories played like an old movie in my mind. The laughter, the love, the dreams we shared, they all seemed so distant now. It was hard to reconcile those perfect moments with the harsh reality of Emily's betrayal. But those memories were a testament to what we had once had. They reminded me of the love that had once been the foundation of our lives. I knew that finding out the truth about Liam's paternity wouldn't change those years of happiness. It wouldn't erase the joy we felt when he was born or the love I had for him, but it would give me a clearer picture of the life I thought I knew and help me decide how to move forward. The early years of happiness were a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost. They were a stark contrast to the present, but they also held the key to understanding what had gone wrong. As painful as it was, I needed to hold on to those memories to find a way through the darkness that now engulfed our lives. The days that followed Emily's confession were a blur of emotions and unanswered questions. As I grappled with the betrayal, my mind kept returning to the events leading up to Liam's birth, the time when seeds of doubt first took root in my heart. Emily and I had always been close, but as my career advanced, I found myself spending more time at the office. Long hours and late nights became the norm, and though I loved my work, I couldn't deny the strain it put on our relationship. Emily was supportive, but I could see the loneliness in her eyes when I came home exhausted, too drained to do anything but collapse into bed. It was during one of those busy periods that I began to notice subtle changes in Emily's behavior. She became more distant, more preoccupied with her own activities. She started going out with friends more often, sometimes staying out late into the night. At first, I chalked it up to her needing time for herself, but as weeks turned into months, my unease grew. I remember one evening when I came home early unexpectedly. I had forgotten a file and decided to swing by the house before heading back to the office. As I approached the front door, I heard Emily's voice inside. She was laughing, genuinely, like she hadn't in weeks. Curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly pushed open the door. I found Emily in the living room, sitting close to a man I didn't recognize. They were engrossed in conversation, sharing a bottle of wine. Emily looked up as I entered, her smile faltering for a moment before she introduced me to her colleague from work. I forced a smile, exchanged pleasantries, and made a hasty retreat to my study. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. It wasn't just jealousy or suspicion that kept me awake. It was a gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. I trusted Emily, but the distance between us seemed to grow wider with each passing day. I tried to talk to her about my concerns, but she reassured me that everything was fine and that I was overthinking things. Part of me wanted to believe her, to bury my doubts and focus on our life together. But another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her late nights and secretive phone calls than met the eye. As Emily's pregnancy progressed, my doubts intensified. Liam was born premature, catching us both off guard. In the haze of those first few weeks, I pushed aside my suspicions, focusing instead on supporting Emily and caring for our son. But as I held Liam in my arms, a tiny, fragile life that depended on us both, the questions resurfaced with renewed force. I remembered the day a colleague jokingly mentioned how much Liam resembled me. I smiled, but inside, I felt a pang of uncertainty. What if Liam wasn't mine? The thought terrified me, but I couldn't push it away. It lingered in the back of my mind, growing stronger with each passing day. Emily noticed the change in me. She sensed my distance, my hesitation. She tried to reassure me, to convince me that Liam was my son, but her words fell flat. The trust that had once anchored a relationship was slipping away, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Now, sitting across from Emily at the kitchen table, the weight of those doubts hung heavy in the air. "We need to do a paternity test," I said quietly, my voice betraying the turmoil inside me. Emily nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I understand, John. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that Liam is yours." Her words were earnest, but they couldn't erase the doubt that had taken root in my heart. As we sat there, facing an uncertain future, I knew that the truth, however painful, was the only path forward. The decision to pursue a paternity test weighed heavily on both of us. Emily and I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Liam's sake, but the tension between us was palpable. Every interaction was tinged with uncertainty, as if we were walking on fragile glass that could shatter at any moment. In the days leading up to the test, I found myself scrutinizing every detail of our life together. I looked for clues, signs that I had missed or ignored. The late nights at work, the whispered phone calls, the sudden changes in Emily's schedule, they all took on new meaning in light of her confession. I recalled a conversation with a close friend months earlier. He had noticed Emily's behavior at a party, a lingering glance, a touch that lasted a fraction too long. At the time, I brushed off his concerns, unwilling to entertain the possibility of infidelity. Now his words echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of my own naivety. Emily, too, seemed lost in her own thoughts. She withdrew into herself, retreating behind a wall of guilt and regret. She spent hours locked in her bedroom, her phone buzzing with messages I was too afraid to read. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but every time I tried, my words faltered. The day of the paternity test arrived with a heavy sense of inevitability. We drove to the clinic in silence, the weight of our unspoken fears hanging between us. The waiting room was filled with expectant mothers and hopeful fathers-to-be, a stark contrast to our own uncertain reality. When our turn came, we were ushered into a sterile room with white walls and fluorescent lights. A nurse explained the procedure, her voice a distant murmur in my ears. Emily sat beside me, her hand trembling in mine. Neither of us spoke as the nurse took a swab from each of our cheeks, sealing them in a sterile envelope. As we left the clinic, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a future fraught with uncertainty. The test results would either confirm my worst fears or offer a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had engulfed us. Back at home, the atmosphere was suffocating. We avoided each other, tiptoeing around the unspoken truth that hung heavy in the air. Liam, oblivious to the turmoil surrounding him, played with his toys in the living room, his laughter a bittersweet reminder of the innocence we had lost. Days turned into weeks as we waited for the results. The tension between us grew with each passing day, straining the fragile threads that still bound us together. I retreated into work, throwing myself into projects to distract myself from the uncertainty gnawing at my insides. Emily, too, sought solace in her own ways. She immersed herself in caring for Liam, showering him with love and attention as if trying to make up for her past mistakes. But no amount of love could erase the doubt that had taken root in my heart. Finally, the call came one afternoon, a voice on the other end of the line, delivering the verdict that would irrevocably alter our lives. The test results were in. The phone call that brought the test results seemed to echo through the house, amplifying the tension that had been building between Emily and me. I answered with a trembling hand, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello, Mr. Thompson?" It was the voice of the clinic's receptionist, calm and professional. "Yes," I managed to reply, my voice strained. "I have the results of your paternity test. Would you like me to read them to you now?" I hesitated, glancing at Emily, who was standing nearby, her eyes fixed on mine, filled with fear and anticipation. "Yes, please," I said, my voice barely audible. The receptionist cleared her throat. "According to the DNA test results, John Thompson, you are not the biological father of the child in question." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of my lungs. For a moment, the world seemed to spin around me, and I struggled to grasp the enormity of what I had just heard. Emily let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand as tears streamed down her face. "John, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. I stared at her, unable to comprehend the depth of her betrayal. Liam, who had been playing innocently in the corner, looked up at us with confusion in his eyes, sensing the tension in the room. I turned away from Emily, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of our home. I grabbed my jacket and stormed out of the house, the cold winter air hitting me like a slap in the face. I walked aimlessly through the neighborhood, my mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak. They swirled together in a tumultuous storm that threatened to consume me. How could Emily have done this to me? How could she have lied for so long, allowing me to believe that Liam was my son? My thoughts turned to Liam, my sweet, innocent boy who had been caught in the middle of our shattered marriage. How would I tell him? How could I look him in the eye and explain that I wasn't his real father? Hours passed before I found myself back at home, standing in the doorway, unsure of what to do next. Emily was sitting on the couch, her head in her hands, her tears staining the fabric. She looked up as I entered, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. "Why, Emily?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice hoarse with pain. "Why did you lie to me?" She shook her head, unable to meet my gaze. "I was scared, John. Scared of losing you, of losing everything we had built together. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never meant to hurt you." Her words were a feeble attempt to justify years of deception, but they fell on deaf ears. I couldn't bear to look at her, couldn't bear to see the woman I had loved and trusted reduced to a stranger. "I want you to leave," I said finally, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I need time to process this." Emily nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She gathered a few belongings and left without another word, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to fill. Alone in the silence of our home, I sank onto the couch, the weight of reality crashing down on me. The life I had known, the family I had cherished, it had all been built on a foundation of lies. As I sat there numb with shock and grief, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed Emily's departure, I found myself adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak consumed me, threatening to drown out any semblance of normalcy. I struggled to make sense of the shattered pieces of my life, grappling with the reality that the family I thought I had was nothing but an illusion. The house felt empty without Emily and Liam. Every corner held memories, both cherished and tainted by the knowledge of Emily's infidelity. I couldn't bear to be surrounded by reminders of what we had lost, so I threw myself into work, burying myself in endless tasks and meetings to distract myself from the pain. My friends and family reached out offering support and sympathy, but I withdrew into myself, unable to find solace in their well-meaning words. How could anyone understand the depth of my betrayal, the devastation of discovering that the child I had loved as my own was not biologically mine? Nights were the hardest. Sleep eluded me, haunted by dreams of Emily's confession, of Liam's innocent smile, of the life that had crumbled around me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage, searching for signs I had missed, clues that could have warned me of Emily's deception. I couldn't bring myself to confront Emily again. Her betrayal had cut me to the core, leaving wounds that felt raw and open. I couldn't fathom how she could have carried on with her affair for 5 years, all the while pretending that everything was fine between us. The days blurred together in a haze of pain and disbelief. I went through the motions, eating, working, sleeping, but nothing brought relief from the ache in my heart. Liam's absence was a constant ache, a reminder of the innocent child who had been unwittingly caught in the fallout of our shattered marriage. As time passed, I found myself grappling with difficult decisions. What would happen to Liam now? How would Emily explain the truth to him? Did I have any legal rights as his de facto father, despite not being his biological parent? I consulted with a lawyer, seeking clarity in the midst of confusion. The legal process was daunting and filled with complexities I had never anticipated. Custody, visitation rights, financial responsibilities, they all loomed large, overshadowing any hope of a quick resolution. Emily reached out through mutual friends, desperate to talk, to explain herself. But I couldn't bring myself to face her. Her betrayal had shattered the trust between us, leaving a void that seemed impossible to bridge. In the quiet moments, when the pain threatened to overwhelm me, I found solace in memories of the early years of our marriage. The laughter, the love, the dreams we had shared, they were a reminder of what we had once been before everything unraveled. But the past could not erase the present. The truth of Emily's betrayal hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of deceit. As I navigated the aftermath of Emily's confession, I knew that healing would take time. The wounds she had inflicted ran deep, leaving scars that would forever shape the course of my life. But amid the wreckage of our shattered marriage, I clung to the hope that someday I would find peace and redemption, even if the road ahead seemed impossibly long. In the aftermath of Emily's departure and the revelation about Liam, I found myself at a crossroads, faced with choices that would redefine my future. The days stretched on, each one a battle against the pain and uncertainty that had become my constant companions. Initially, I had thrown myself into work as a distraction, but as weeks turned into months, I realized that I couldn't continue to bury myself in endless tasks. I needed to confront the reality of my new circumstances and find a way forward. One of the first decisions I made was to seek therapy. Talking to a professional helped me unravel the complex emotions I was grappling with: betrayal, anger, grief, and a profound sense of loss. Through therapy, I began to process the trauma of Emily's betrayal and the impact it had on my sense of self-worth and trust in others. Therapy also provided me with tools to cope with the overwhelming emotions and navigate the uncertainty of co-parenting with Emily. I learned to set boundaries and prioritize my own well-being while maintaining a relationship with Liam, whom I continue to love and care for as my own despite the biological truth. Legal matters surrounding Liam's custody and visitation rights were daunting, but with the guidance of my lawyer, I took steps to ensure that my role in Liam's life was legally recognized and protected. It was a challenging process, filled with negotiations and legal documents, but I was determined to secure a stable future for Liam, regardless of our biological connection. As time passed, I found moments of solace in reconnecting with friends and family who had stood by me during the darkest days of my marriage's collapse. Their support became a lifeline, reassuring me that I was not alone in my journey toward healing. I also dedicated time to self-reflection and personal growth. I explored hobbies that had once brought me joy but had fallen by the wayside during the tumultuous years with Emily. Painting, hiking, and reading became outlets for processing my emotions and rediscovering aspects of myself that had been overshadowed by the turmoil of my marriage. Throughout this journey, I grappled with forgiveness, not just for Emily, but also for myself. I wrestled with feelings of inadequacy and self-blame, questioning whether I could have done more to prevent the unraveling of our marriage. Therapy helped me recognize that forgiveness was a process, not a one-time decision, and that healing required compassion for both Emily and myself. Navigating co-parenting with Emily was perhaps the most challenging aspect of rebuilding my life. We communicated primarily through our lawyers initially, establishing clear boundaries and agreements regarding Liam's care and upbringing. Over time, however, we found a way to communicate directly, focusing on Liam's well-being and maintaining a civil relationship for his sake. As Liam grew older, questions about his paternity inevitably arose. Emily and I decided to be honest with him, explaining in age-appropriate terms the circumstances surrounding his birth. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and uncertainties, but Liam's resilience and understanding surprised us both. He continued to see me as his father, regardless of biology, and our bond remained strong. In the midst of rebuilding my life, I also began to explore the possibility of new relationships. Trusting again was a daunting prospect, but I took tentative steps toward opening my heart to someone who valued honesty and mutual respect. It was a slow process, marked by moments of hesitation and vulnerability, but each step forward reaffirmed my belief in the possibility of finding love again. As I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point, I realized that while the pain of Emily's betrayal would always be a part of my story, it had also propelled me toward growth and self-discovery. I had emerged from the wreckage of my shattered marriage with a newfound resilience and a deeper appreciation for the complexities of love and trust. As time passed and wounds slowly healed, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous journey that had led me to where I stood today, a place of introspection, growth, and renewed resilience. The aftermath of Emily's betrayal had reshaped every facet of my life. I had navigated the complexities of co-parenting with Emily, striving to provide stability and love for Liam despite the painful truth of his paternity. Our relationship evolved into a delicate balance of communication and mutual respect, centered around Liam's best interests. Therapy has been instrumental in my healing process. Through introspective sessions, I confronted deep-seated emotions of betrayal, anger, and grief. I learned to forgive not only Emily but also myself, releasing the burden of self-blame that had weighed heavily on my shoulders. Legal proceedings had been challenging but necessary. Securing my rights as Liam's de facto father had provided a sense of stability and security amid the uncertainty. It was a testament to my commitment to be a constant presence in Liam's life, regardless of biology. Reconnecting with friends and family had been a source of strength. Their unwavering support had bolstered me during moments of doubt and despair, reminding me that I was not alone in my journey toward healing and renewal. Exploring new hobbies and interests opened doors to self-discovery. Painting, hiking, and reading had become therapeutic outlets, allowing me to reconnect with aspects of myself that had been overshadowed by the turmoil of my marriage. Navigating the complexities of dating again had been a cautious yet rewarding experience. I had learned to approach new relationships with honesty and vulnerability, rebuilding trust and embracing the possibility of finding love once more. Through it all, Liam remained the beacon of hope and joy in my life. Our bond had transcended biology, rooted in love, shared experiences, and the mutual commitment to nurture his growth and happiness. As I stood at this juncture of my life, I embraced the lessons learned from my journey. I had discovered strength in vulnerability, resilience in adversity, and the transformative power of forgiveness. The scars of Emily's betrayal will always be a part of my story, but they no longer define me. Looking toward the future, I felt a sense of optimism and possibility. I had weathered the storm of heartbreak and emerged stronger and wiser. Armed with newfound clarity and a deep appreciation for life's complexities, I was ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. In closing this chapter of my life, I carried with me a profound gratitude for the experiences that had shaped me, the highs and lows, the joys and sorrows. They had sculpted my character, instilled resilience, and ultimately guided me toward a path of authenticity and inner peace. As I turned the page to begin a new chapter, I carried forward the lessons of love, forgiveness, and resilience that had illuminated my journey. With Liam by my side and a renewed sense of purpose, I embraced the future with open arms, ready to embrace the richness of life's unfolding story.